Hi, welcome everyone to the fall. It's not quite fall yet, but we're calling it the fall 2023 open house. The 11th year of literature at our house. And we're going to do a whirlwind trip around all the classes and share with you the books and the what we're hoping to do, what we're excited about doing in the classes and in the literature classes and the art appreciation classes and the possible writing workshops. To start with, we're going to do some brief introductions. Then we'll get into a brief poetry presentation I want to give on 5 tips for you to enjoy poetry with children. And if you're just coming in, feel free to share in the chat quick hi, and if you'd like to also share in the chat what it is that you're hoping to get from tonight. What are you especially interested in learning from tonight? And I'm seeing some things in the chat right now. And Gabriel, you said you have what might be appropriate for 3rd graders, 8-year-olds that like to create art. And Nicole, a lot of stuff. And Sophie, your mom, Sarah's watching. Hi to you, Sarah. And Arivia, your mom's here. Oh, okay. Mom's here. Ari's mom's here, and Ari will be here in a few minutes. All right, great. Come on in. Come on in. So let's start off with some brief introductions. Many of you know me. If you don't know me, actually, could I hear that? If you're new to literature at our house, I'd love to hear that. If you're a current literature at our house family, would you share that so we kind of get a sense of what the breakdown is, and that will help us kind of direct a little bit of the chat. So my name is Luke Travers. I've been a teacher this is my 20th year of being a professional teacher, and I've been teaching literature for 18 years and teaching art appreciation based on my approach from my book Touching the Art for 12 years now. And so I teach the junior high literature and the high school literature and the junior high art appreciation and the elementary art appreciation. And we'll be talking about those classes in a moment. Let's see. Rachel, may I pass it off to you for a brief intro?
Absolutely. So I'm Rachel Miner. I teach the upper elementary class, and I have for more than 5 years. Is it 6, 7, 8? I don't know. It's yeah. Before teaching, my son was in Luke's classes for years. So it seems like literature at our house has sort of been part of everything for a very long time. I currently teach at a literacy center, which is also a school. So any given day I could be teaching elementary, junior high, or high school, any subject. I get kept on my toes and I have a really, really good time. Tonya?
Thanks, Rachel. Tonya, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Tonya Fingerhut, and I've been involved in education for the past 30 years. I have worked in public school, private school, and homeschooled and tutored. I am currently an online teacher tutor, literature and writing, and I've been with Luke's program for the past 4 years. And this past summer, I decided to take a refresher course on the IEW writing program, which I learned about many, many years ago. And I use a lot of things that I've learned from that program in the writing that I do with my students. So welcome.
All right. Thank you, Tonya. Okay, so we're going to start off with a brief presentation. 5 tips for enjoying poetry with children. And then afterwards we'll get into the classes and the book lists and what we've got planned. So these 5 tips are tips not necessarily, they're kind of tested out in the classroom, but I'm using these, I'm giving you to these knowing that you as an adult, as a parent, are not a teacher. And this is more, here's some tips to make not necessarily a poetry lesson, but a poetry activity or interaction or poetry reading more fun and enjoyable. And after I share my 5, Rachel and Tonya, if you want to chime in with anything else there. So I got to tell you, when I was a kid, I did not enjoy poetry much. And it was kind of sometimes really confusing. I didn't know why I was reading it. I didn't like reading it in classrooms. It felt like some kind of work I had to do that was not something I was motivated for. Now, there are other kids who enjoy poetry, but these tips I hope will be helpful for anyone, for motivated kids and for kids that are not so motivated. And those of you who are current or former students might recognize some of this as some things we implement in the classroom, but I think are very implementable by parents very casually. So tip number 1, and I'm going to have a sample poem here to kind of guide us along with this a little bit. And those of you who are thinking a little bit more big picture, you might see a little bit of the pedagogy of literature at our house and some of what I'm sharing. So read aloud. I still make the mistake of picking up a poem and reading it silently. It's not meant to be read silently. It's meant to be music. And so every time I pick up a poem, I try to read it out loud, even when I'm by myself. And when we're in the classroom, we read aloud. And what I'd suggest with your children is don't just read it aloud once, but pass the poem around and have everybody read it aloud themselves. I'm going to read this one aloud, and I'm not going to do a very good job of it. Isn't it strange some people make you feel so tired inside? Your thoughts begin to shrivel up like leaves all brown and dried. But when you're with some other ones, it's stranger still to find your thoughts as thick as fireflies, all shiny in your mind. Okay, so I just read that. And oftentimes it's challenging to read poetry because it's not written out in a way that is conducive to reading. I pause at all the wrong places. You don't pause at the end of lines in poetry. It's still a sentence. And so tip number 2 is to rewrite the poem. Rewrite the poem. And this is something I would suggest, you could do it beforehand if you want to, or just as a little quick activity, and to rewrite it in prose form so that you break the end of lines and you just simply read it as it is. The rhymes are still going to be there. The rhythm is still going to be there, but you're going to read it more naturally. Isn't it strange? Some people make you feel so tired inside. Your thoughts begin to shrivel up like leaves, all brown and dried. But when you're with some other ones, it's stranger still to find your thoughts as thick as fireflies, all shiny in your mind. And that really helps with understanding the poem and making it more natural. Third, there's a lot that's challenging about poetry, and there's some techniques we use in the classroom to get us a little bit more clear, including replacing unfamiliar words with synonyms. But a fun thing I really like to do to get to, sometimes the metaphors, the dense metaphors in poems, is to illustrate, to find the opportunity to draw something in the poem. So in this poem, you kind of look at it and you say, okay, what would be fun to draw to help us visualize and understand clearly what's going on? Let's see. Isn't it strange some people make you feel so tired inside? Your thoughts begin to shrivel up like leaves all brown and dried. Oh, that's a good image. Leaves all brown and dried. But when you're with some other ones, it's stranger still to find your thoughts as thick as fireflies, all shiny in your mind. So we've got 2 states of mind, one dried leaf state and one firefly state. And then so I went ahead and just did a quick little illustration. And just doing this just really helps me to visualize the different states of mind. So I've got my thoughts here. Here are my renditions of fireflies. Little orbs in space that shine brightly. And then dried leaves, I tried to make them as decrepit as possible. So just quickly, simply illustrating whatever it is, fun drawing activity, and just in a classroom, I found it to be so helpful for students to really grasp the meaning of a poem. All right, tip number 4. Ask the question, what's the story? Often with poetry, it's treated as some kind of meticulous puzzle that you've got to unlock, turn screws, figure out, plug in. But a poem is literature, and literature is story. Now, there are not all the elements. There isn't a plot in a poem. Often, sometimes there are poems with plots, but there's character, there's setting. There might be some plot. Ask what's the story, and this is a good way of kind of summarizing. So, very simply, I'll just say Rachel is the author of the poem. I'll just say Rachel meets 2 kinds of people. One kind makes her feel tired and uninspired, but the other kind brighten her mind and inspire her. And when you're able to just state the words about what's going on in the poem like that, what's the story, you are making the meaning your own. And parents, I encourage you to say, okay, dear child of mine, let me know what you think of my story, my statement of what's going on in this poem. Do you like it? Do you give it a 5 out of 5? Or do you change something about it and model that? And that's a good way of generating the conversation instead of just sitting there asking the question, so what's being said in this poem, and then waiting for an answer. That's not much fun. So offer up yourself as the sacrifice to share your thoughts. All right, last tip. Pick a portion to memorize. What we do with literature at our house is we love to memorize poetry. It's in a dose that you can hold on to. You can hold on to the image of characters in a novel. You can hold on to the whole poem. But some poems can be challenging, and it feels almost oftentimes like a duty to like, okay, gotta memorize this. So I would say, ask, is there a part you really like about this poem that you want to remember, that you'll find useful? And so you go through and you say, you know what? I kind of like the dried leaves part. I meet a lot of people like that, and I don't like them very much, and I'm going to remember that. And you just memorize. Your thoughts begin to shrivel up like leaves, all brown and dried. And that little bit of a memorization is something that will stick with you, that will tie the meaning, that will make it more part, just like you might put a poster of a painting you like on your wall. So you have the poster of a poem inside your mind. And then what I find is oftentimes students who might memorize a portion of it will go ahead and memorize the rest. So those are my 5 tips here. Read aloud, and I would say read it again aloud, rewrite it, put it in prose form, illustrate it to make it more concrete, to make it clear. Ask the question, what's the story, to put it in your own words, and pick a portion of the poem, a portion of it to memorize. Now, I know, Rachel, you've got another tip that I really like that goes to more about the meaning of the poem and how to connect it to yourself. Would you share a little bit about that?
When we use poems in class, a lot of times it's either at the beginning or end of a novel. So if it's at the beginning, it's kind of like we just enjoy the poem this way, and then we come back to it oftentimes at the end, and we're like, so why did we start with this poem? So a piece that I love to add is first connecting with it, right? So in this case, we might be like, okay, so are there some people that you're around sometimes that make you feel like all shriveled and brown and dried? And are there others that make your thoughts as thick as fireflies, all shiny? And we'll have that kind of discussion, and students, they really get involved. It's not just, oh, these are words and I had to memorize it. It's like, oh, right, this person, and this is what they did that made me feel that way. And this person, I'm always shiny around. And we apply it also to our novels that we've read throughout the years. Like, all right, so which characters are the ones that feel like leaves, and which ones are the ones that are all shiny? And it just brings such extra depth and delight to literature. So lots of fun.
Thanks, Rachel. And to build a little bit on that, if you're thinking about, okay, how to make that part of your conversation with your child, I remember, Rachel, you told me, like, have a character try the poem on for size. So imagine, what would Anne of Green Gables think of this poem? Or what would Taran from the Book of Three think of this poem? And that gets into, if you think about it, you say, oh, you know what, Anne, I think might like it. And then you start to think about why. And becomes a discussion about the theme and the meaning in a roundabout way, without asking straightforwardly, what is the theme of this poem? But having this kind of imaginary scenario where you pretend the characters are reading this poem and reacting to it. And you might ask, okay, what do you think your sister would your sister like this poem? Or what would she like about it? What wouldn't she like about it? All right. Tonya, anything you want to add?
The only thing I would add, with working with the lower elementary students, sometimes it's so much fun to take poems and rewrite them and make it their own, in some way. And it's just fun to think about the words that are used and what words you want to substitute, talk about rhyming and all those things. It's a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you, Tonya. Okay. I'll take any questions right here if there's any thoughts or questions about these tips before we go on. Lisa, love these tips. Great. Thanks. And feel free to either just jump in or open your mic or raise your hand or use the chat. All right. Oh, well, I want to ask you one question. Which of the tips do you think you might find most useful? I'm curious about that. Which of these do you think you might find most useful?
I like the first one, reading it aloud. I never really thought about that poetry was meant to read aloud. And actually, I like the second one too, rewriting it and not having to stop at the end, just rewriting it so it flows a little easier in your mind.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. And let's see, Scott, I've always loved reading aloud, then thinking through the story. And Gabriel, read aloud and memorize. Or I've read aloud and what's the story? You find those two helpful. Okay, great. Feel free to keep typing about any of these tips you find especially useful. Very curious about that. And we're going to start now with what we have in store for literature, art appreciation, and art appreciation for the year. We're going to go through the grade levels in order, starting with lower elementary. And if you have questions as we're going along, put those in the chat so that you don't forget them. But then after we go through all the classes, we're going to address particular questions for each of the classes. So we want to share with you everything that we have. And then if you have a question about a particular book or writing assignments or something like that, we'll bring those up after we go through everything. So, but put the questions in the chat so you don't forget them. Okay, and let's see. Jesse and Kelly have illustrate and read aloud as what you liked about the tips. Sophie, figuring the meaning of the story through illustrating had never occurred to you. Mm-hmm. Good. Glad that was neat for you to see. And Monica, I think illustration may be welcoming and less threatening to some students than some. I know that it's helped students that have trouble, and Rachel, you probably know more about this. That might be a discussion for another time, but students that have trouble visualizing and I have some trouble visualizing. It helps me so much to just make a picture of it, and it just pops out when I make a picture. So yeah, Monica, less threatening, students and some other dialogue-driven discussions. Love doodling and while listening to poetry. Yeah. And Gabriel, your 8-year-old twins on their own create their own poems along with a picture. It's fantastic. All right, great. So let's go through these, and we're going to start with the lower elementary. And if you're not particularly interested in a certain grade level, and the book's in a certain grade level, you can still think about what it is that how what's being taught ties to everything else, because you might see some through lines in the kinds of books we pick and in the kind of approach we take throughout all the grades. All right, Tonya, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I plan to start the year with the book Pigs Might Fly. This is such a fun-loving story about a pig whose outlook is so benevolent. And this story is really a metaphor on an impossibility. So what a great thing to start the year with, to hang on to that. And you'll notice this time I included a statue. I included 2 statues. And these are such great story heavy statues that I think the children will relate to very well and would love it. The rest of the stories that you see here, these all kind of relate to wilder times where there's different kinds of dangers and difficulties, but this is really an opportunity to see how the characters navigate their relationships and situations. The Writing the Pony Express is a fairly easier book to read, but it takes place during such a pivotal time in American history where there's the gold rush, there's the railroad being placed down, there's this westward expansion, and there's such a lot of drama in that short story. And Farmer Boy, you'll probably recognize that as part of the Little House series. This one really stands alone pretty well. We learn about Almanzo and what he really loves and his father. Almanzo is the youngest child in his family, and the father treats the other children a little differently because he changes. And I think this is really telling what the father learns about being a father and how this affects Almanzo's life. And I really look forward to highlighting that as we read the story. Caddy Woodlawn. Now, Farmer Boy and Caddy Woodlawn, they both have similarities in that they kind of take place in similar times, but very different stories. Caddy Woodlawn is a very adventurous soul. She gets herself into trouble. She doesn't understand why her parents are treating her a certain way, especially with her mother. But she comes to an understanding. And so we're going to find out why that is. The Sign of the Beaver is another one. Now, this one takes place in the 1700s. The child is older and he's left on his own to take care of the house. And he goes through some pretty severe difficulties. And he has a situation with another Indian. And their relationship is kind of complex. You don't quite know how it's going to turn out. You don't quite know why there's a lot of tension, but yet there's a lot of attraction as well. And it's really interesting to see how the story rolls out. I have another statue there, the sunbow. You'll see in the list, I put a ballad in there. That's a cowboy ballad. And I just think it'll be so much fun to use that as something to study and talk about cowboys and why they sing so many songs. And the last one, I don't know if I can pull this off. I don't know if I'll be able to find a way to edit the Song of Hiawatha in a way that'll make it meaningful for young children. So this is my plan. I might change it, but that's what I have so far. And let me just tell you a little bit about the writing workshop. So I do writing workshop on Thursday. You don't have to sign up for it if you want to sign up for the class, but it does give me some time to work on the writing assignments that I assign in between these stories. And we also have additional time to do work with writing. And so just so you know, with the young children, I will walk them through the writing assignments in the regular class. I am right there to show them the steps. I am right there to help them get started. I am right there to help them spell words. I make the homework assignments really clear. So when they have to go on their own, they write a sentence or two or three independently, just kind of depending on what they're ready to do. And the additional thing I might do in between the writing assignments, in between the novels, I might do things such as, we might write our own cowboy song. We might write about campfire songs. There's some campfires are mentioned in these stories. We might write about the gold rush in some way. So that's just gives you an idea. Those are the kind of writing. I'll try to think of writing assignments that connect to the stories or connect to the time period. And I'll do expository paragraphs and alternate with something creative, which could be a poem, it could be a story. And I think that sums it up.
Sorry, that was quick on my part. Tonya, thank you very much. And if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and we will come back to those. And Tonya, if you want to answer the questions in the chat, if you see any there. All right, Rachel, upper elementary.
Yes. So we're going to start our American History Year with The Witch of Blackbird Pond. This is a really fun book for students to relate to, as our main character, Kit, comes from a very different culture and finds herself very much the outsider. And that's something that I think we can all relate to. And students tend to really gravitate to understanding how hard it is both for Kit and for the community that she finds herself within, because they care about each other, but they're really different. Fever 1793 has a lot of intensity, but probably one of the most endearing characters. Students talk to me about the grandfather in this book for years after, because this is we often do a 3-year cycle, and they're coming back and talking about that character in particular, but also several of the others, because there's so much intense experiences in this book. There's a bunch in here that are like, maybe we'll see. Carry On, Mr. Bowditch is probably. Speaking of someone who carries on after adversity, the students and I start to gather a list of and then this went wrong, and then that went wrong. Mr. Bowditch is one of these books where you're like, and he's still going, and it's inspiring, and it's also really, really fun. I warn the students. I'm a bit of an Anne of Green Gables fanatic. I adore this book so much. I adore this character so much. I have read the whole 8 series of these books. I don't know how many times, and her passion for life is so fun and so delightful, and students get to experience all the delights, all the enthusiasm, and some of the rather dramatic flops when her imagination and her eagerness she gets a little carried away. Tom Sawyer is another one that's on the maybe, it just depends, but students love the not just the feistiness, but the inventiveness and the creativity of this character, and it really does a great path. Johnny Tremaine is one that will either probably do Johnny Tremaine, or Indian in the Cupboard. Usually we don't do both, but again, books where you see a character develop and change, and we can notice this person, this character is doing something really different than they did at the beginning. And why? What happened? Is that what are we noticing? And that's again something that students can identify with, right? This growth and this change based upon experience. So that is the plan for this coming year. And definitely one of my favorites.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. Okay. If you have any questions for Rachel, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll come back to those. Now, I want to share a little bit about the elementary art appreciation. So in a similar way that Tonya is describing the statues of that she's going to incorporate in her literature class where she's focusing on the story. So the elementary art appreciation class, we are focused on reading the stories in artworks. And this is a class that is for grades 1 through 6, and it is not intrinsically tied to the upper or lower elementary books that students are reading. Now, if students make connections independently between artworks and what they're reading, sometimes I have that in the back of my mind for them to do that, but it's not something that is required. This is a class that somebody who's not taking a literature class can sign up and really enjoy. And often I have a lot of students in the elementary art appreciation who can only make it fit in their schedule to come to the elementary art appreciation. We meet once a week, about 35-minute class. And one thing I'm going to stress with this year, a little bit more than I have in the past, is oftentimes at the end of classes, what I do is I'd have, because we have a wide range of ages, but it works. It works. First graders and sixth graders, it works really well together, actually. But I will often have 2 kind of homework assignments, a drawing assignment and a creative writing assignment that's tied to the artwork. And so that I'm going to follow up, I think, a little bit more with those. Those have usually been a little bit more optional, but I might try to incorporate those in the class a little bit more than I have in the past. So that's a slight change for those of you who are familiar with the elementary art appreciation. Okay. Let's see. Let's go to junior high. That's me. All right. So as was mentioned before, this is kind of the American history year, but that's not exclusively what we pick books from. Well, the standard for selecting books is whether or not they're going to provide an engaging story that is going to be meaningful to the child. So you'll see some books that are not American history here. We're going to start the year with To Kill a Mockingbird. And it's a classic about empathy. Children in a town in the racist South must learn how to interact with people they get along with and don't get along with. Shane is going to be our second book. And Shane is a story of a gunslinger who comes to a town and the young boy who admires the heroism of this gunslinger. We'll have Inherit the Wind. Is one of the books that one of the plays that we're going to read. We're going to have several plays. I think that's one bit of a distinction of more plays in the junior high than the upper elementary, which is the story of the Scopes monkey trial. And so creationism versus evolution. We will explore some Hawthorne short stories. We will also definitely be doing A Doll's House this year, and Henrik Ibsen play, which is often taught at like a college level, but I think is one of my favorite to teach to junior high students, about a housewife who's seemingly happy until she starts to realize that she actually is not. And all these books that might seem that's something like that's foreign to junior high students and maybe foreign especially to junior high boys but it's especially to them that I'll say that the meaning of the story is going to really resonate with you, because the meaning of the story has to do with whether or not you accept or question all the ideas that you have been given since you were raised. And so those are the main ones that we're definitely going to do. Gabriel, real quick, I'll answer. Horatio Hornblower, I've kind of liked it okay. Maybe at some point I might do it in high school. But it's a good one that's tied to American history. There are several here that I am still considering. Now, the reason why it's a little bit open-ended is because we get a feel for the class and the dynamic and the age, the relative age range and maturity of the students, and then we pick out some books depending on how that goes. I would like to do Victor Hugo, one of my favorites to do. Almost every year I try to incorporate Victor Hugo, and I've got two. In the past, I've done Les Miserables, like an abridged 800-page version of it, abridged from 1,500 pages. Or we might want to do one that I haven't taught before called Toilers of the Sea, another Victor Hugo about a mechanic who tries to save an engine caught in rocks in the middle of the ocean. Calumet K is another one with that kind of efficacious hero. It's an American story about a worker who's building a grain elevator and all the challenges that come with that. And then O. Henry stories are fun to incorporate. One thing I'm going to have this year that I really like is I'm going to make sure to have at least one tutorial session with students. So that means we're going to take a week off from classes, and I'm going to have like a 45-minute tutorial with each of the students for me to have some discussion time with each of them. And we might incorporate some kind of presentation that they are going to give based on that tutorial. And that will probably be happening sometime midway through the year. I think one of the themes of my evolving approach to teaching is you're going to see I'm incorporating a lot more individual time to go along with a class time. Okay, so that's junior high literature. Junior high art appreciation. So junior high art appreciation is a little bit different than the elementary art appreciation, and that the junior high art appreciation is going to be more tied to the books that we're reading. I'm going to be more conscious of the books, and these artworks are going to be thematically related to the characters, to the situations, to the themes of the stories. And we are approaching these artworks on their own. So even if there's a student who's not doing the literature class, they could enjoy the art appreciation on its own, because we're starting with each of these artworks as stories. So the focus here is on same standards, riveting stories that will have meaning for a junior high level student. Okay, and that meets once a week. And I'll talk more about schedule and stuff later on, but just to give you a little bit of the pedagogy that we're doing. High school. So high school literature. We're going to start with Fahrenheit 451, about someone whose job it is to censor, who decides to start to read what he's censoring. Then our second is going to be a play, Henrik Ibsen. He's one of my favorites to teach, riveting plots, deep meaning, An Enemy of the People, about a doctor who discovers a danger to his town, but nobody in the town seems to want to treat the danger seriously and treat him more as a danger. We will do a Scarlet Letter. We're not doing that first. Often that comes first. The language is kind of challenging, and we want to make sure that we're going to build up a little bit to the story of forbidden love and ostracism from society. Great Gatsby is one we'll definitely do. About what are your priorities in life, and whether your values are going to be fulfilling or they're going to be empty in the end. And then I've got a lot of leeway depending on where the class goes. So the high school is geared towards 10th through 12th graders. And we're going to, here's a selection I've got: Pergorio, a Balzac novel about a student who goes to the big city Paris to make his life; The Crucible, which many of you have probably read, about the Salem witch trials. The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand about an independent architect is another one we'll think about. I enjoy teaching Ayn Rand's novels, and I find the high school students find them meaningful. So we might do either The Fountainhead or Ayn Rand's novella Anthem, which is a post-apocalyptic story about a society that has lost the word I. Animal Farm is up there, and we'll probably do Animal Farm as a kind of allegory for a lot of the general ideas and themes we talk about in the high school class, which is an individual's relationship to society. Most of these works have that going for them, and Animal Farm is kind of a fairy tale on that. And then that's not Toiler, but Toilers of the Sea. I might teach it first at high school and then see how that goes. But that's something I'm going to be exploring. And then there are more possibilities. Okay, so that, and just quick heads up on the high school. There are going to be 3 weeks of tutorial sessions. There are 3 weeks where we do not do classes, but each student is going to have a one-on-one with me, and they will be giving presentations. Oh, I didn't talk about poetry. Poetry, we do a poem. That's funny. Did a poetry presentation, did not talk anything about the poems that we're doing. For the junior high, after each book, we're going to have a poem that's tied thematically to the book in some way. And then for the high school poetry, there will be some poem that's tied to the books, but I want to give a lot more choice to the students for picking out poems that they're intrigued by, and they're going to give at least one presentation on poetry. And then towards the end of the year, they're going to have one culminating presentation. It's often these presentations that are the most valuable product that the students have. It's, let me get my thoughts down and share these thoughts with my colleagues. Okay. I think that wraps up those things, and I probably left some things out, but I want to open it up now to questions. I know some of you asked questions in the chat, but if you'd like to jump in vocally, please do that. And let me address some questions here. Looks like, yeah, Evgenia, you're asking, do you plan to add writing class to the upper elementary? Okay, so that's something that we were thinking about doing, and I don't think we have enough students to justify a writing workshop, but I am going to be offering tutorials, writing tutorials for upper elementary, junior high, high school. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I go to the schedule and share some of that. But essentially, those writing tutorials are going to be, you've got a writing assignment due with Mrs. Miner. So, okay, let's turn it in to me first. We'll talk about it. Let's do a second draft. So it's going to be writing tutorials that are tied to the literature class that you're doing. So kind of like a miniature personalized writing workshop, you could say. Okay. Any more questions, or if I miss a question in the chat that you want to bring up?
Maybe just for the writing for the upper elementary, it has much more of a breadth, I think, than the other classes, in that assignments, some students are at the spot where they respond to a prompt in like a single paragraph, and some it's a page and a half, and all that is totally age appropriate and fine for the writing in upper elementary, because there is that breadth of skill.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Formal grammar instruction. Oh, go ahead. I hear a voice. I like voices.
Hi, this is Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi. Could you say a little bit more about the presentations for high school?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, okay. Last year they gave 3 presentations. The first one was a poetry presentation. They found a poem, and I think it was something that, okay, find something that's related to Jane Eyre in some way. And got everybody, I have suggestions for poets to go find, or like, here's some 19th century romantic poets that you can explore, and maybe some poems. And then during the tutorial, they came to me and with 3 or 4 poems, and we read through each of them and got to know them and said, okay, which one looks like the one you want to give a presentation? And then they put together a slideshow presentation, 8 minutes, and deliver that presentation as if they're kind of teaching this poem and sharing and going through the process. Like, here's the poem, here's my translation of it, here's the theme, here's how it connects to literature that we've read, and here's how it connects to my life. And then they take a couple minutes for questions. I want to encourage interaction. I think in the slide I called the high school class, it's a seminar. I want to consider the high school like a seminar where I'm encouraging as much interaction and content creation by the students themselves. The second presentation they gave was, we just finished, this was last year, so it'll probably be a little bit different, but you'll get the vibe. We just finished reading Othello, and we spent a long time learning to translate Shakespeare, so we want to make use of that skill a little bit more. So I said, go find another play that you're curious about, but we don't have time or the inclination to read the whole thing. Why don't you just read the first 2 acts, come back and report to us in the first 2 acts, and whether or not you're going to, you would recommend it, and whether or not you're going to finish it and why. So the setup, read the setup for the play. And so that's what they did. They gave a presentation of the first 2 acts, and everybody picked a different play. And the third presentation was, I think the parameters were, okay, incorporate a compare and contrast for at least 3 books that we're reading over the course of the year. And this took a lot of different forms, actually. I get to know the students over the course of the year and get to know what they're passionate about, what they're strong in. So there were, I think actually one student just said, okay, I'm going to do a musical, or like an analysis of this opera and compare it to scenes from a couple of other our stories, and compare and contrast a pivotal scene in this and an opera that they like. And they were a music student. Another student who's more artistic, like to draw, did book covers, or almost like, after you read the book, here's the cover, the spoiler filled cover for each of the novels that we read, and shared that, and that was their presentation. So one of the big things is I want them to interact, and I also want them to generate as they start, in 10th, 11th grade, start to generate their own interests and passions and thoughts to create something that they have a stake in. Does that answer your question, Lisa?
Oh yeah, I love all of what you said, and that's why we do literature at our house.
Cool. All right, formal grammar instruction. Tony, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit maybe about lower elementary. How do you incorporate grammar in the writing workshop? What's the role of it?
So I certainly bring up grammar with my students. I do think it's a good idea to have a grammar workbook, that your children at home work on a grammar workbook at home, so they have something that's more thorough and more complete. But I certainly do talk about adjectives. I certainly do talk about phrases. I certainly do talk about punctuation. And we have a lot of fun. Yeah, I just try to find fun ways of talking about it so that they can include it in their writing. And I often have my students, because I really love the IEW approach, I will sometimes make a little list of requirements for the students to include a strong verb or a quality adjective or an ly word. And those are really fun ways to see them make a difference in their writing when they do these requirements. So that's what I have to share.
Yeah. Thank you, Tonya. And one thing that I'll follow up on for like junior high and high school is what you're describing, Tonya, is like an organic use of grammar as part of writing that's connected to the books they're reading and so forth. And in the older grades, and then Rachel, if you want to chime in a moment, oftentimes what happens with grammar is it's self-correcting in class. So if a student is just doing the literature class and not doing a writing workshop or tutorial with me, we're not spending time. I'm not giving feedback on a second draft. I'll do it for like a major assignment, like presentation, or if there's like a big essay. But in general, what happens is students turn in their email their assignments to me, and then I will post them anonymously in class, and we will read these out loud, and we will discuss each of their assignments. And what happens when you read them out loud, the focus for us in class is the content. But what happens is I will have another student that is not the student who wrote it read it out loud. And if they kind of stumble over words, or there's like spelling mistakes, or then that student who wrote it gets a real sense, oh, you know what, I didn't proofread, or you know what, that was a really confusing sentence. So they get the, I don't know, real world feedback from their peers. So that's one way that's grammar is kind of incorporated. And the other way is no, I don't know that. My thoughts are bubbling like fireflies all around me right now, because you guys are a stimulating group, but I don't know that I'm certain about that. I'll bring in Rachel to save me. Rachel, you got something you want to add there?
Yeah. So in the upper elementary, there isn't like official grammar instruction as far as like sentence diagramming or identifying parts of speech or things like that. There's the writing assignments are constructed in a way that they do help students create something that's either chronological or some kind of hierarchy, right? There's some kind of organization that's part of it, but as far as like parts of speech or punctuation or those kinds of things, the upper elementary very much benefits from what Luke was talking about, where the students are reading anonymously each other's writing assignments, and they just grow over time. So I agree also with Mrs. Fingerhut that as far as like formal instruction, if they don't know all their parts of speech and stuff like that, having their own grammar workbook is really helpful for them.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. Okay. What more? Any more questions before talk about schedule and logistics for students and so forth? Okay, keep typing if you're still typing for any questions, but I want to get into some practicalities here. Course schedule. So starting with elementary. The elementary classes the literature classes all meet 3 times a week. 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Lower elementary at noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific. Upper elementary at 2 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Pacific. We do have the writing workshop with Mrs. Fingerhut, and that is on Thursday at noon, 9 a.m. Pacific. And then the elementary art appreciation is on Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern time, 12 p.m. Pacific. If there's enough interest for a second elementary art appreciation, I'm considering different times. And Tonya, thanks for that clarification there. Your elementary literature, 35 minutes. Rachel, is it 45 minutes for upper elementary?
It's 40, yeah.
40
So
minutes?
it's 12 to 12:40. Mm-hmm.
And then for elementary art appreciation, that's 35 minutes. when George can keep me on schedule. I have down here, so we're not doing a formal writing workshop for upper elementary, but I have down here that I would like to give the tutorials a try. I'm very familiar with the curriculum that Rachel teaches. I've taught it for years before she took over, which I am happy about. And she does such a wonderful job with. But I am offering for anybody who's interested in this tutorial a free 30-minute tutoring trial. Tutorials can be hit or miss. It's the dynamic, it's the chemistry, it's a lot of things. And so if you're interested in saying, okay, maybe we're interested but not sure, I'm happy to just try it out for 30 minutes. I'd be offering tutorials for 30 minutes or an hour long, depending on the needs. It might be like once a week, something like that, but that's something to figure out on an individual basis. All right, junior high. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific time. I am still considering a junior high writing workshop. I think right now, officially, I've got 3 who are interested. I think I would want to get 6 students who are interested. So if you're a junior high family and are interested in a writing workshop, let me know. Email me, luketravers@gmail.com, or through literature@ourhouse.com. Just send me a message there and let me know if that is something that you would like to hear more about or are interested in. And as discussed before, the writing workshop is a supplement to the literature class where the primary focus is on writing that second draft of your literature writing assignments. But also there is space for more to do there as well. So we might do things in the writing workshop that we don't necessarily do in the literature class. And occasionally what's happened too is I will have the writing workshop students produce something that will then be shared with the literature students as a whole group so that they have an audience for it. That's one of my big things with writing, constantly trying to get an audience for the writing that students are doing. I'm also, I'm definitely going to offer writing, junior high writing tutoring if I don't do the writing workshop. I'll still probably offer it if I do. Junior high art appreciation, Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. Pacific. And there is also some writing there, and there are several presentations there. So students, as we're reading these artworks, what I mean by reading is you're essentially writing. You're describing everything that you're seeing in the artwork, putting together the pieces of the puzzle of what is happening in the artwork. But then students, I think the last time I did a junior art appreciation, they did like 3 presentations where they picked a painting they were intrigued by and read it to us and identified a theme and connected it to novels that we're reading and so forth. And then the high school literature seminar meets twice a week for 50 minutes. Junior high was 45 minutes. And that's Tuesday, Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And I'm offering the high school writing tutorials for that. And oftentimes there's a wide range of students in the high school. I think probably out of any of the classes for me, that's where the range comes up. And so I found that the tutorials helped some students like, oh, wow, I'm tackling the Scarlet Letter. This is pretty dense. And just having that one-on-one conversation with me about it and writing a little bit about it really helps. Okay. And as I mentioned before, I am very happy to experiment, to try out a 30-minute trial tutorial session. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to message me. Any questions here about classes schedule or class organization or timing or anything like that? Okay, Gabriel, I see possible to get a hard copy of Stories in Paint. Stories in Paint is my second book, and I don't have it on sale because I don't officially out of print. I have a handful of copies left that I'm holding for like contests, and I'm looking at the possibility of doing another print run very soon. So Gabriel, that's in the near future. Uh, there is the ebook, but having the hardcover is definitely nice. But I will definitely, keep touch with Touching the Art, and I'll be announcing hopefully soon another print run. Okay. Last bit of logistics this is primarily for returning families, or families that will be part of it. But if you're considering doing literature at our house, if you're new to us and considering doing it, this will give you a sense of how the machine works. Okay, so if you're coming to Literature House, and you're enrolled this year and you haven't taken any classes yet, but you will be, here's what's going to happen. An hour before every class, or for each class you're enrolled in, you're going to get an email, technically from me, but our registrar, Steve, I'm so glad he does it all. He sets up all the emails and schedules them, and it will include a Zoom link to that class. It's an individual Zoom link. It's not one Zoom link for the entire year. It's one Zoom link for that particular class. And there are a couple of reasons why we do it that way. One for security, and the other one because we hold on to the recordings and we want to have each recording. It makes it a little bit easier to have each recording separate like that. So look for that email an hour before class, click on the Zoom link, and you're in class. And then we send out that email because I think it's just a good reminder. You have it in your calendar, but just, it's junior high literature today. Let me finish reading my, Hunchback of Notre Dame. Okay, so that's, recordings. All the classes are recorded and they're available that day. So if you miss a class, you get to watch it. And if you want to rewatch something, you get to, and all the classes are put on a web page, so you can go back to previous dates and previous classes. So if you're taking if your spring break doesn't align with ours, and you take a month off for vacation or whatever it is, you go back and you can find all the classes that are available and recording and catch up there. Let's see, at-home setup. So this is as we're after COVID, we're getting more and more used to Zoom, and what's really helpful with Zoom, and having good audio and being able to hear well and having minimal distractions around you is helpful. So you probably know a lot about this stuff. Students should be comfortable, but also I do see a difference when a student is lying in bed versus sitting up at a table or at their desk or something like that. So think about the at-home setup a little bit to try to help with the students' engagement. Let's see. Okay, registration and subscription payments. If you're interested in registering, we still got spots. And the lower elementary, the upper elementary, and the high school, I think I haven't officially closed the junior high, but we're teetering there. And then I'll be announcing whether or not we're going to do a junior high writing workshop soon. And I'll put that link up on the website. But if you're interested in registering, go to literatureatourhouse.com on the registration page, or if you have questions about that, email me. And the way that payments work is you have registration payment, which is equivalent to 1 month of the cost of 1 month of the class. And then we have 9 months during the year. So there are 9 payments during the course of the year, and we do a PayPal subscription. And in the past, what has happened, the payment has come at the end of the month. And I'm looking at maybe changing that and having the payment at the beginning of the month, but that's TBD. So you'll be seeing an email from me, but it's a 9-month subscription for that. Okay, questions here. And Rachel and Tony, if there's anything you want to add about at-home setup or anything, feel free to jump in. But I'll see if there are questions as well. Let's see. Gabriel, go ahead.
I was just going to respond on some of the interactive things. Each of our classes does it differently, but I like to share a split screen and have students fill in their highlight or confusion from the reading from the prior class. And so they're starting with sharing with what piece from the reading was a highlight, whether that was a good highlight, I loved that, or a bad highlight, that was the most awful thing ever, or something that confused them. And then throughout, there are all these challenge questions. So yes, the classes are highly interactive. I still find that students who have missed a class because they were on vacation or they were sick are really able to get a lot out of that because they've already participated in many of the classes. So while they aren't actually that particular time participating because it's a recording, they still are able to really gain that feel. So when they need to do a recording.
Thanks, Rachel. Tonya, you got something you want to share about interactivity in your how interactive your lower elementary classes are?
That's what I would probably say something very similar, starting the class with some kind of highlight from what they've read. Having those discussions with the children is the biggest part of why we're together, why we're here. We're here to share the journey. We're here to hear ideas. We're here to, what do you, share our stories that relate to the stories that we're reading about. That, I don't know if it's Gabriel's question. You're asking us, how do we compare to a public school? I think that's really hard to know, but spending time discussing things with our students is, I think, the biggest aspect that we give our children, and time to write. I would say with the writing workshop, just some time to talk about what we're doing and writing. And I don't know if anybody else has anything they would share about the differences between what we do and the public schools.
Maybe some parents might have a little bit more of knowledge, because I'm having to draw a lot back from my my time in public school.
I think they're very much a literature class too, right? So this isn't an English class. It's not like learn grammar and learn the other pieces of an English class. This is really clearly a literature class where it is about developing that love and appreciation of literature and that ability to access it and keep it. I mean, these are characters that students keep with them and love and learn from. So it's, I think, just a little bit different. If you took a literature class, I think it would be comparable, but it's not an English class.
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction, Rachel. In terms of Gabriel, you're asking how comparable is a full class compared to a standard school class. So for the high school, I think my max is about 8 to 10. For the junior high, about 12 to 14. Rachel, upper elementary, maybe like 8 to 10 max.
Yes, 8 to 10 max.
And then Tonya, about 6 to 8, something like that, max students.
Yeah, that sounds like the max I would do.
Yeah, so we've got deliberately smaller class sizes in order to be able to foster a lot of discussion. Yeah.
Luke, it's Gabriel. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess just to clarify, because it's a little tough trying to type it out.
Absolutely.
But I guess I wasn't thinking so much about the number of students, so that's helpful, and I can understand why you need to keep it to a smaller size. I guess what I'm wondering is this considered to be for somebody who's homeschooling a replacement for taking what courses they would ordinarily take through elementary, middle school, and high school for the equivalent subjects? Is this more of an adjunct to a homeschool program, or an adjunct to what they would be getting, or maybe not getting in another private or public school? I'm just trying to get a feel for what, how this fits into it. Is it like a complete substitute? Like, if you take these courses, you just need science and math and history, and then you've got a whole curriculum? Or is it not meant to substitute in that matter? Does that make sense?
I think so. So if here, I'll give a quick try at an answer. And I see a little bit of chiming in here. And then Scott and you, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts too. And Lisa, I see some thoughts you're sharing there too. It's not a one-for-one replacement. So as Rachel mentioned, you often have the English class. This is not a replacement for the English class. We're strictly focused on literature. But this is what I'll add. The approach that we take and the amount of writing and the amount of discussion that we do intellectually, pedagogically, I think provides much more than you would get often in an English class. Maybe not in terms of here's what you check off in a, is there the grammar? Is there the research essay component? Not in that sense. Is my child going to be able to do the SATs? There's nothing quantifiably replacing one versus the other. But I think when you see the children be able to talk and be able to write about the literature that they're reading, they're developing kind of, I don't know, the soft skills, ancillary skills, the broader development that affects everything else. So in terms of, if you're lining it up beside another curriculum, I don't know that you would find the equivalent. But what we do, I think, stretches a student's mind and more than you might find. And I'm not speaking too much based on experience with what is in other curricula, but I think so. So let me get in some other parents. Let's see, Scott.
That's helpful. I kind of suspected that's the impression I was getting. So that's clarifying. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, Scott and Yoon, do you want to share a little bit more from a parent's perspective?
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure what grades your kids are, Gabriel, but I'd say, yeah, it's not a replacement for grammar, but I'll just tell you right now, most English classes, unfortunately, are not teaching grammar anymore. So you got to get it yourself. There are still teachers who will, so you just got to find who they are. And like Tanya's teaching IEW method part of, or incorporating that in. I haven't used it myself, but I've heard that their Fix-It grammar is really good. So if you're homeschooling and need grammar, maybe that's something you could do. But other than that, if you've got public school or private school, you just got to find that good grammar teacher. And they're hard to find, but they're out there still. And yeah, it's not a replacement for grammar, but yeah, I think everybody, Luke and Rachel and Tanya have said are pretty much spot on. I would say from our perspective, definitely you're getting a lot more intellectual content. The book groups that my kids have done outside, even at good schools, are just not comparable. So kudos to you guys. But yeah, I would say if you need grammar, and you do need grammar, those are some ideas for you. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Yun. And then Tonya, you have in the chat, Lee Ben's homeschools transcript was very helpful for me designing homeschooling curriculum. And Ari's mom, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Completely agree. Thank you. And Kathy, good explanation on the comparison between what we do and curricula in public school. And then Lisa, you said, I think the advantage of literature at our house is the freedom to really serve the student rather than the curriculum standards. Yeah, we're definitely paying attention to each student's individual growth. And part of that growth comes in not just they read literature, but they share and they discuss literature and they think about it as part of a group. All right. Any final thoughts or questions? Tonya?
I just wanted to encourage parents who are interested in the lower elementary to please contact me if you have questions. We can meet on Zoom. We can talk online. You can send questions. When you have young children, you often have more questions. So always feel welcome to ask anything.
Tonya, would you put your email address in the chat? And then that will make it easier. And then what I'm going to do when I send an email out for the recording, I'm going to include, speaking of poetry and poetry presentations, I'm going to include a link to a poetry lesson that Tonya taught on a little Victor Hugo poem for elementary students. Okay, and I missed Literature Alice classes, waiting for the class to start. Great. And Lisa, lots of depth of discussion. Rachel, last word?
Yeah, I think you're also going to have several of my class samples, and I'm looking forward to the start of the year. I love teaching this, and I love the classes that we have and the way the classes gel and students get to interact and share delight in these works. It's a wonderful process to see how students grow throughout the year.
And just echoing what you're saying, Rachel, we do this and we have this set up, this little community, because we love teaching literature. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. And Jesse and Kayla, learning to integrate between the different books and artworks is wonderful. I'll be sending out a recording. If you want to get the recording and you're not currently in the Literature House mailing list, send me an email. Let me put that in the chat real quick at that email. And I look forward to seeing everybody either this year or sometime down the line. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, Mr. Travers.
Bye, Ari.
Bye.